Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. The sweet peas have had a really good spring and early summer, and they're my favourite fragrance of any flower. I've got two varieties growing here side by side. There's this one, which is Kupani's Original, and has got these two tones, and is one of the very earliest of all the sweet peas, and is still one of the best. And the other one is called Black Diamond, and you can see it's this deep, dark burgundy colour. But the one thing that sweet peas hate is drought. Hot, dry conditions means that they will try and set seed. And to stop that happening, the secret is to pick the flowers all in one go. Remove every single flower head that you can see. And we found that if you do that every 7 to 10 days, the energy goes into producing another flush of flowers, which returns about a week later. And if you see any seed pods, remove them straight away. And you should have sweet peas growing and flowering and smelling wonderful well into August. On today's programme, we explore Hestercombe, a garden of 100 acres in Somerset that has been managed over the last few months by just 2 gardeners.
The first couple of weeks, it was a bit overwhelming and it was quite tricky for us to get our heads around. If no one's here to see it every day, what are the important things we have to do?
And there's another chance to join Jo on a visit he made to a captivating garden belonging to an interior designer.
Not knowing anything about gardening and how to make a magical garden, I literally had to use my kind of knowledge of interiors and apply the same principles.
And I shall be planting up my squashes and pumpkins, as well as lifting and dividing bearded iris. I sowed these Gardener's Delight tomatoes 7 weeks ago. And if you sowed them along with me and then pricked them out and potted them on, yours should look something like that, ready to grow a lot bigger given the right amount of sunshine and soil. Now, I'm going to plant these outside into a raised bed, but these will grow just as well in a pot, in a grow bag, anything really that will hold soil. And by the way, with grow bags, if you're worried that they're a little bit shallow and won't take the roots, if you've got an old pot, particularly one that's broken, cut the bottom out, cut a hole in the grow bag, sink the pot into it, put compost into the pot, and then plant the tomato into that, so it's got extra root run and also much easier to get a stake of some kind in to support it. And you will need to stake these because they're cordon tomatoes and grow dead upright. Now, it doesn't matter how you grow them or where you grow them, the technique is the same. I'm going to space these out about 18 inches to 2 foot apart. And tomatoes should be planted good and deep. Make a hole and pop that in like that and go right up to that first leaf. And there are 2 reasons for this. One is to make sure that it's really securely anchored in the soil, because these become quite big and heavy. And the other is because if the stem is in contact with the soil and underground, it will grow more roots. Firming it in really well. Now, if you're growing them in a grow bag, you'll find that they will have marked out spacing. And I would normally grow 2 in a grow bag, although there are 3 places allocated for planting. I think if you put them that close together, all you're going to end up with are fewer, smaller tomatoes. So we'll put that like that. Gardener's Delight is a variety that I grow every year because they never let you down. So if you're starting out, Gardener's Delight is a very good place to begin. There are some dwarf tomatoes that are adapted for growing in a hanging basket. So if you really are limited in space, you will be able to buy dwarf bush tomatoes that will trail down outside a hanging basket. Cordon tomatoes are trained to grow as one vertical shoot, and you pinch out all the side shoots that would make them bushy. Now, we'll do the pinching out later, but you need to have your support for that cordon, and they need tying in at every stage of their life. And this is just about long enough, so push it in and make sure it's in good and strong. I'm putting the support in a couple of inches away from the plant. I don't want to damage the roots, but it doesn't want to be so far away that you have to bend the tomato back to reach it. And if you've got any doubts, we'll put your supports in first and then plant up against them. Right, I will obviously support the rest of them, but I'm going to water them first because it'll be easier to get at without the canes in the way. It is important to water them in well and then give them a good soak once a week. At the same time, feed them. Now, you can buy a proprietary tomato feed, and they work extremely well. You can make your own comfrey feed, and I use a lot of seaweed feed. If you're growing in a container, you'll need to water more, particularly if it's hot. You may have to water every other day. And if you're growing in a grow bag, make sure there are plenty of drainage holes in the bottom, because if you're not careful, you can water it and it becomes a bag of wet compost. But the thing that will do these more good than anything else at all is a nice blazing summer. So fingers crossed for that. Well, we certainly had a lovely spring, which made life more bearable for all of us who had to spend much more time in our homes and gardens than we ever might have imagined. But it was really tough for those thousands of gardens right across the country that were just preparing to open their doors to the public, and then they had to lock down. And we went along to one of them, Hestercombe in Somerset, to find out how they coped with this situation and also what they had learnt from it.
What's unique about Hestercombe is we have 3 eras of garden design in one place. So you can walk through a beautiful landscape garden which dates from the 1750s, which is full of follies and waterfalls and ponds. It's really atmospheric. When you get to the end of that garden, you're then walking into the Edwardian garden, which is really romantic. It's a collaboration between Edwin Lutyens and Gertrude Jekyll, and she basically overlaid all of his design with plants. I describe it like she throws a blanket of flowers over his hard landscaping. And then we have a Victorian terrace outside of the house. Ordinarily, there are 7 full-time gardeners within the team, including myself, and then we have about 30 garden volunteers. And, you know, you need that many people to keep an estate of this size going. We've got like 100 acres to cover. In the run-up to March is quite a big deal for us. I mean, horticulturally, it's ever so busy. You're sowing seeds, you're pricking other seeds out, you're gearing up for the season, getting all the planting ready. But then the advice came from the government to lock down, and all of a sudden the gates were closed. You know, there were no visitors, no one on site, and we had to make a lot of very quick decisions. It was decided that 2 of us could stay on working and all the rest of the gardens team would be furloughed. So the first couple of weeks when it was just Ben and I here, it was a bit overwhelming and it was quite tricky for us to get our heads around, like trying to figure out actually what is important. If no one's here to see it every day, what are the important things we have to do? The main priority for us was protecting the historic parts of the garden, so the Georgian, the Victorian and the Edwardian parts had to stay safe, if you like. These are delphiniums, and this is a variety called Blue Nile. And ordinarily, I would stake these using our coppiced hazel from the estate. So you can see I've done that on the peonies here. It looks lovely, but it's quite time-consuming to get it to work and to look nice. So the main point of the staking was just to secure them so that they weren't going to damage themselves. They weren't going to flop over and get mouldy and botrytis. And so instead I've staked these with canes, and it's not as aesthetic. It's never going to be as pretty, but it was faster. So this is the daisy steps. This is quite a big feature within the gardens, designed by Lutyens and to link the two gardens together. It's called the daisy steps because of these little daisies, and these are called Erigeron carvinskianus, or Mexican fleabane, if you want an easier word to say. It's one of the areas that we've had to let go a little bit just because there's only two of us here. It doesn't really matter. So we would normally mow this whole area and keep it quite neat. But actually we've left it. It's been really interesting. I mean, as you can see, the grass is ever so tall. It's full of insect life, full of pollinators. And it might be an idea that we can take forward. Maybe we can keep some of this wild look. Obviously, we have to keep a balance here because fundamentally this is a historic garden, and historically there would have been lots of gardens and this would have been immaculate. However, when you mix that with modern thinking and climate change and wanting to bring more wildlife into the garden, maybe there's a compromise to be had here going forward. It's almost like you want to get your hands back on the steering wheel, but not quite as tightly. Part of the work that we'd done pre-lockdown was to sort of add a bit of interest around the site. We'd planted quite a lot of tulip bulbs in pots around the place. And obviously then, as they came into flower, no one was here to see them. So we put them all in the boots of the car and we took them to local nursing homes because we just sort of felt at least people could enjoy them. So this is the Victorian terrace where we have a twice yearly bedding scheme, and we'd already pre-ordered all of these plants and we wanted to still work with the nursery. They'd done the effort of getting them for us and growing them on. So we decided to go ahead, but we did make a change. This year is the 300th anniversary of Bamfield, who designed the landscape garden. So we were working to a plan, and this is Bamfield's coat of arms. So we decided to use this as the design for this whole bedding scheme. But actually, when the plants arrived, and it was just Ben and I here, for the sake of time, we decided to just go with a random pattern. And actually, the most important thing we could do, especially in this heat, was just get the plants in and get them watered as quickly as possible. One thing that I'm really pleased about is that the roses are going to time to be in bloom just as we're allowed to reopen our doors. And this one's looking fabulous at the moment. This is Rosa White Pet, and it starts off with these beautiful little pink buds and then opens to these double flowers. And if I keep deadheading this, this will flower now right the way through to November. And I just am really excited about everyone being able to come back at a time when the garden is just looking so amazing. From a personal point of view, my work changed quite a lot because as a head gardener, you often spend a lot more time running a team, running the volunteers, making sure everyone else is doing stuff and everything's going all right. In a way, it's just rekindled the whole sort of passion for gardening, having my hands in the soil. I know now that it keeps me sane. I know how much it means to me. And I'm just really looking forward to being able to share that enthusiasm with everybody when they come back. And I'm really looking forward to the volunteers because they become like a family to you as much as anything else. So it'll be lovely to have them back, if nothing else, to get the weeding done. Plants keep going, nature keeps going, and so long as we're tending to it as much as we can, it will still always be a beautiful place.
I've been to Hestercombe 3 or 4 times, and every time I go there, I find something new that is beautiful and inspiring. And it is now opened. It opened a couple of days ago. It is limited. You have to buy your tickets in advance. And if you go to our website, you'll get all the details on how you do that. Now, I'm cutting back this geranium. This is geranium farm. You can see it's really big. And in April and May, it is covered with flowers that start out touched with burgundy and then turn a distinct purple. But there are far fewer flowers and seed heads at the moment. When you're cutting back any hardy geranium, go right back to the ground. Don't leave any stems if you can help it, because the new growth will come from the base. And the more you remove, the better it will regrow. Throughout the whole spring period, when we were confined to our gardens and couldn't get to garden centres, we had to recycle plants, take cuttings, and in many ways that was a liberating experience, and we all learnt from it. But we've had a film from Barry Birmingham in Hertfordshire, who shows that it's not just plants that could be recycled ingeniously.
During this time of isolation, I've been trying to recycle loads of stuff in my garden and keep out of the way of the rest of the family. And I thought you might like to see what I've been doing. So I'm going to show you. So, my children are 21 and 23, and they had a trampoline, which I've now managed to make into an arch, which is going to hold, hopefully, roses. And I've made this arch using logs, and it becomes a retaining wall. So that was the first bit of the trampoline that I used. And then the second bit of the trampoline, you can probably see in the background already. It's a fruit cage, which I've used the legs and the bases of the trampoline to make into a fruit cage, which I've wanted for a long time. And we better not mention the swing in the background, which I've also stolen for beans. So the theme of this isolation has been lots and lots of recycling. So hopefully that'll have inspired you to do something with some of the stuff that you've got lying around at home. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.
All over the country, there must be thousands of trampolines where children have grown up and no one quite knowing what to do with them. Well, now they can be turned into fruit cages and arches, and if they're as good as Barry's, they'll be really good indeed. Now, it is time to divide these bearded irises. They were fabulous this year. They loved the hot spring. The only downside was they flowered very early and they finished very early. And it's a good idea to divide bearded irises every 3 or 4 years, and this gives them new vigour. Otherwise they get a bit old and they flower less and less. Now you can see that I tied a bit of wool around the colours, because obviously at this stage you can't tell which was which. But it doesn't matter what type you've got, what variety or how long you've grown them, there is one way to do it, and it's like this. And it's very straightforward, it's not difficult. The thing to do is to get a fork and lift underneath them, and try and get down deep so you lift as much root as possible. And very often these rhizomes can form quite a solid mat. There we go. Now you can see clearly these are the roots, and there are new roots forming, and the rhizomes are on the surface. And the more sun that gets during the summer, the more it bakes, the better the flowers next year. Now at this stage, I'm going to cut this back. But if you're not moving iris, you do not need to trim the leaves back. Now you can see that this is a clump of rhizomes. So if I go across there like that and cut that, that is a perfectly healthy little plant. And as long as there is a piece of growing leaf or even a bud, they'll be fine. Let's cut this one here. The inner part, that was the centre and core of the plant, you can see that it's old and looking a little bit manky. So that I will throw away. And I would stress that this treatment is for bearded irises only. Other irises you don't treat in this manner. When you're replanting these, the roots need to be under the ground. And if my hand is the ground, that's how to replant them. So the roots are in the soil, but the rhizome is on the surface. And the reason why you cut the stem and the foliage back when you move them is because if they were full height, they would act as sails in the wind, and there's a real risk that they would at least damage the roots, if not pull it right out the ground. So you cut them back simply to make it more stable. Well, this is a job that will take a little while. So let's go back a few years and revisit a garden in London near Joe's home, belonging to the interior designer Abigail Ahern.
Now, it's always good to hear about a garden you've never seen before, especially when it's just around the corner from where you live. But what intrigues me about this one is it's made by a designer, but they're not a garden designer. Abigail Ahern is at the forefront of British interior design. Tucked behind her terrace house is a west-facing 6-metre by 30-metre garden. Abigail bought the house as a wreck back in 1998, but only turned her attention to the garden in the last couple of years. What a haven in the city.
I've become a garden obsessive. I know nothing about gardening and lived with...
That's not true, and I can see that from your garden.
Lived with barrenness for years and years and years, but we have this double height glass wall. So I was looking at this fairly miserable garden for ages, and the outside looked so dismal that it drove me crazy. And not knowing anything about gardening and how to make a magical garden, I literally had to use my kind of knowledge of interiors and apply the same principles to outside and planting. So I wanted it to feel really magical and lush and tropical, and also evergreen. So a lot of the time in the winter it looks like this, which is really key because I overlook it all the time. So I bought a cabin and plonked that at the end of the garden, which really grounded the whole space, and then realised all the planting was just shoved around the perimeter. So it's the same in interiors. Everybody shoves their sofa against the walls, like Doctor's Waiting Room, which drives me crazy, and I'm all about bringing things in so you're tantalised. Like, I want to feel like I've fallen down a rabbit hole and I don't quite know where I am.
This is a new addition, isn't it?
It's a new addition.
This is a mimosa.
I love its feathery leaves.
It's beautiful and in flower.
I know.
You know how big that gets? It's just going to go up and up and up.
Is it? Yes.
Yeah. That's what you want.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah. So is this a bespoke cabin?
It's not. I just picked it up off the internet, and it's my little bolt hole, and it's where I go and write and just escape.
It's black or very dark grey. People are scared of that colour in a garden, but it does work, doesn't it?
People are scared of the colour in the garden, in interiors, but I think the thing about inky dark colours is they make anything that stands against it really pop out and look lush. Lighting has become really integral because I realised before I lit the garden I was just looking out in the winter on this really black space. So I've lit it like an interior. So it becomes an extension of my indoor space at night.
Abigail's garden is only a small space, but she's packed a lot into it. The first thing that strikes me is how successful the connection between the garden and the interior is. So here we've got plants. They feel like they're flooding in from the garden. What Abigail's done so well is break up the middle space of this garden. And I know it's so difficult to get away from that rectangular lawn in a rectangular space, but you've really got to start filling up the middle of the garden with plants and trees and objects and sculpture, whatever it might be. In a way, what you're trying to do is get the dancers onto the dance floor. Most of the planting in this garden is informal, is very relaxed, except these two long lines lines of Carex grasses straddling the side of the path, two really big brush strokes in the planting. And what they do is lead you right up this straight garden path. And when you get to the end, you're not disappointed. And that's so important in garden design. You've got somewhere to go. This city garden is not only unique, fresh and packed full of personality, but I just love the process it's been through to get here. Abigail has broken lots of rules. We get stuck in our ways and perhaps a little bit formulaic when it comes to our own gardens, but she's shown that a whole different approach can create something really special.
Come on. It's very interesting seeing the interior designer view on a garden and creating an outdoor room, almost with furniture. Now, I've got some plants here that I want to be big and unruly and to grow really well. These are squashes and pumpkins. And I've got a number of different varieties here. We've got round pumpkins, which are brilliant for children at Halloween. We've got small ones, which are probably better for cooking, and some with thicker skins that store well, some with thinner skins. And they're very much plants of high summer. They need heat and preferably moisture and lots of nutrition and lots of it from the middle of June to October. I sowed these plants about 6 weeks ago, but if you haven't sown any and you can't buy any, you can sow seeds now, but sow them direct. Don't sow them in a pot, put them in the ground. Put 2 seeds in where you want them to grow and then weed out the weaker of the 2. Now, the plan is to grow them up these pumpkin climbing frames. I've been growing them vertically for the last few years and it works really well. They're pretty strong, just bean sticks won't do. They're going to have to take quite a lot of weight and I will get 2 or 3 plants in each row. So I'm starting with this one. This is called Blue Hubbard. And the skin is blue, but the flesh is orange and very good. And the ground has been really well manured. I've put in loads of garden compost. All right, let's put another Blue Hubbard there. So that's like that. I've got a variety which I've grown many times over the years, which is Musc de Provence, which has got a greeny skin. And I'm going to put this in between so it can be trained up both sides. So that will go there, and that like that. The beauty of growing them up as support is that you can grow up to half a dozen different pumpkins in an ordinary bed, whereas normally you need to leave 2 or 3 meters between each plant if they're to develop properly. So it really is the only practical way to grow them if you're at all limited in space. Now this one is called Blue Curry. And the curries are Japanese and they're smaller. And they're much better for storing and absolutely delicious. And then in the final end bit, I've got some butternut squashes. And you can grow them against a fence, against a wall, you can grow them up a wigwam, you can grow them in a container as long as it's big enough. I can go there, and now I can plant them. Now when you plant them, it's easy. You just make a hole and stick them in. So we will just pop that in, like that, and then just make a donut around it, so that when I water it, that will fill. That way, the water will all go to the roots as well as the rain, and they must never be allowed to dry out. When I've finished planting them all, I'll give them a good soak. And then I won't need to do anything for a few weeks until they start to grow, and then I need to tie them in. But we'll come back to them, and if you are growing them, we'll keep revisiting them, so hopefully we could all harvest glorious pumpkins together in early October. Still to come on today's programme. There's another chance to join Arit on a visit she made to Kent to talk to people whose physical and mental health have been transformed through gardening.
There's something about being sort of close to the plants really makes you feel sort of grounded and connected. And that's what this place does, it makes you feel connected.
But first, thank you for all the films that you've sent us. We've had thousands, and we've loved seeing your gardens at home. And we've met some amazing people through it, but none more remarkable than Sue Kent, who sent us this film from her garden in Wales.
I'm Sue Kent, and I live in a house by the sea near Swansea. I was born with an upper limb disability caused by the drug thalidomide. This has made me highly adaptive and innovative all through my life, and including in my garden. What I love about my garden is when I wake up in the morning and I go outside first thing, there's nearly always something new, a new bud, a new flower, a new leaf uncurling, and it's so exciting. My garden entertains me. The garden to me is like a canvas. I try and design it, but then nature takes over and it has its own ideas. It's like my painting partner. I've been developing my 3/4 of an acre plot, which wraps around the house over the last 30 years, getting a little bit of weekly help from a local gardener with weeding and pruning. I'm a sports massage therapist in my daily life, and I use my feet to massage. And it's so nice when I get home to be able to use them for gardening. I really like to have that connection with the soil. Having a disability means there's some things I can't do in the garden, but I adapt and work around these things, and then I'm able to enjoy my garden. I just love it. Finding the right tool for the job is terribly important. It makes all the difference to gardening independently. I can just use my toes and pick up the weeds and put them in the bucket. There's one drawback to reading with feet. They don't make foot gloves. And all I've got is these socks for protection. So my cucumbers really want to get into the ground. They've been very successful, and perhaps I put them in a little early, but I think it's warm enough. I think they're going to survive. I've got a few spare in case they don't. So I tend to put things on their sides and roll them around a bit and squidge their container with my feet. It should come out with some roots ready to plant. This is an F1 hybrid, and it's prolific. It's an outdoor variety, as long as the weather's good. And this is one of the sunniest places in the garden. It'll grow well up the trellis. And then I just backfill around it with my feet. And obviously I'll give it a bit of a water. In my family, gardening was in our blood. My great-grandfather had the royal warrant to supply asparagus to the Prince of Wales. And when I was little, I spent many happy hours in the garden with my father, who was also passionate about plants. So it's not surprising I really love growing veg. This large funnel I found on the beach after a storm, and it is magnificent for growing rhubarb in. Keeping containers small means that I was able to grow salad and kale over winter, and when the greenhouse gets too hot, to bring it out and prolong the season without things bolting. As you can see, all the pots are not too big, so I don't have to bend too far and I don't have to reach too far. So everything is hugely accessible, which gives me independence of gardening. I make my own compost. It's full of nutrients, and I find it better than just using shop-bought compost. The only trouble is that straight from the compost heap, it's full of little woody bits that need to be sieved out. But sieving for me, with short arms so close to my body, is a whole body experience, and it's just a little bit too shaky. So I put a pot inside the bucket, and then I rest the sieve on top, and I pour in the compost. Oops, Daisy. And unlike James Bond, I take my stick and I stir my compost. I don't shake it. And I found it to be quite therapeutic in a strange way. And now I just hope Mr. Robin's going to come and pick out all the lovely worms that have appeared at the top of it. Isn't that fabulous? He's quite a greedy Robin. I think he's got a big family to feed. And gradually, all the good stuff falls through the sieve into the bucket below, and I'm left with all the twigs and stones. This is the end result. Lovely, friable compost, ready for seedlings to go into. Really lovely. One of the first things I had to do was change the normal tools. I've got no thumbs, so gripping is difficult and I'm not very strong. So using standard tools isn't ideal. These are the ones that I have found the most useful for weeding. The notch allows the weeds to fall into that notch, and so when you lift it out, it brings the weeds out quite easily. My greenhouse is overfull at the moment, so I needed to increase the space as I wanted to bring my strawberry plants into the greenhouse. I've tried gardening with strawberries outside on the floor, but when I go to pick the strawberries with my toes are too strong and the strawberries get very squishy. So this year I thought I'd dig them all up and bring them inside. I haven't really got the room, so I went up into the attic and found an insert from a wardrobe, and I made a strawberry tower that seems to be quite effective. Having a physical difference, whatever it is, can create barriers in the garden. But it's worth working around them because the rewards are so great and it brings such joy. I have such a can-do attitude because I look around me and there's so many things that I want to do, so I have to be able to do them. I just love life and I want to be able to fully partake in it.
Well, I'm sure you found that as inspirational and as impressive as I did. And Sue has made a lovely garden. Now, I'm trying to keep these roses looking lovely using what I will confess is a slightly ridiculous piece of kit. This is a normal secateurs on the end of an extendable pole, which is quite useful for deadheading roses like this. This is a rose called Madame Caroline Testute, and it's a hybrid tea climber with great big blousy blooms, which is fantastic until they go over, and then they become great big blousy soggy blooms. And of course the whole point of deadheading is to make it flower again, so it's important to do it. And if I don't use this, then I have to get up a ladder and do it, which I could easily do. But I like gadgets. Okay, I'll keep snipping away at this, but it is time to visit another one of your gardens. And this time we go to Liverpool to visit a family who are growing a crop that I suspect most of us have never even tried.
Hello, Gardeners World. My name is Masood Malik. I'm a psychiatrist, and this is my garden here in Liverpool. But today, I have my gardening team with me.
My name is Zach. And I'm Jacob.
The two boys, the gardening boys. And we're going to be growing mushrooms. Guys, do you want to have mushrooms we're going to grow?
Is it shiitake?
Correct. And?
Oyster.
Excellent. And we'll talk you through how we're going to do it. Well, the theory is simple. What you need is freshly cut logs. These are about 2 to 3 weeks old. We need a drill, and we need the oyster mushroom, which is located in the mycelium stored on these dowels. £10 from the internet, not too bad. £10 indeed.
Yeah.
Right, next, we're going to do the practical. Here we go. Drill a hole. Let's have the dowel you'll put it in. Put it in there.
Oh God.
That's it, and push it in. And to seal it, we just need a bit of wax.
The warrior ones. So now them hammering in the
Dowels.
Dowels.
And the shiitake mushrooms like to be flat on the ground, while the oyster mushrooms prefer to be standing up. It has taken us about half an hour to do about 5 different logs with 2 types of mushrooms. Harvest will be in about 6 months, and then every year for the next 6 years. It's not bad for a little bit of work. I think it's a bargain.
I have tried growing shiitake mushrooms like that, I have to say, with mixed success. But Masood has clearly realised one key factor, which is that children love the whole rigmarole of growing mushrooms in logs. And let's hope, for his sake and the kids, that they're enormously successful and have masses of lovely mushrooms. Now, I want to make masses of lovely plants. And I've got a hydrangea. This is Hydrangea Annabelle, which is immensely popular because it makes this enormous, great puffball of white florets that flowers from midsummer right through into autumn. Will grow in shade, will grow in sun, a really good doer. And now is a good time to take softwood cuttings. What you're looking for are nice, straight shoots without a flower bud on it. So I'll just take that off there, like that. I'm going to take it below the leaf node, like that. And I'll do 2 of this. So we'll take that and then remove the leaves lower down because the leaves will be losing moisture. So I'm left with a straight stem and a couple of leaves at the top. Now that, I think, is a little bit too much leaf there, so I'm going to cut that in half, just to reduce the amount of transpiration. Now, I'm going to use pure perlite, and it's got no nutrition whatsoever, but cuttings don't need any nutrition to form roots. If you haven't got perlite, just use a nice loose, open, gritty potting mix. I'll pop that in there, and then the other one I will put on the other side, like that. Once it's got roots, we'll pot it on into good compost. Now the point is that I've still got my parent plant, and potentially I've got 2 more. Now, it is important, once you've taken a cutting, to water it really well and then keep the air around it moist. Now, this is the key at this time of year. If I just popped that outside and it was a hot day, that would die before it possibly had a chance of producing any roots. So put it somewhere out of direct sunlight and either put a polythene bag over it, supported by canes, or mist it. And that will reduce transpiration and give the roots a chance to form. And they will do it really quickly. This will start to produce roots within a week or so. And you can do the same with herbaceous perennials. It doesn't have to be shrubs. Eurybia divaricata is known and loved in gardens for its small white flowers, little stars that dance on the end of long shoots, and it grows very well in shade. And this will flower from mid-July right through to September. People often ask why you put cuttings around the edge of a pot. And it's partly do it because I've always done it, but it's supposed to be because they are less likely to dry out. Water this as well. Now, people are becoming increasingly aware of the relationship between health, particularly mental health, and gardening. So now seems a good time to have another look at the visit that Arit made last summer to the Blackthorn project in Maidstone in Kent. where gardening is prescribed by doctors as part of the road to recovery from mental and physical illness.
For a long time, I've truly believed that being out in green space is really good for us. It's something that we need as a natural therapy on a regular basis. But what is it about a garden or that outside space that is so healing? The theory of spending time in green spaces and prescribing gardening instead of pills is gaining momentum. I've come to the Blackthorn Trust Garden in Kent. It's been set up to help those suffering from mental health issues and to help people manage chronic pain. Patients can be referred by a doctor when traditional approaches aren't working. Susanna Odlin is a therapy coordinator here. So you would come in, referred, and then what happens?
Most people are very depressed or have lost their confidence. Most people are in a very dark place when they arrive. So together we find out what they hope to gain from being here.
Alongside counselling and therapy, patients are encouraged to spend vital time in the garden with others.
We often socialise people first, and because we all need this sense of belonging, that's also part of a well-being. The garden can be a very safe and gentle place to start. Some of the people would say, I feel completely dead inside. So working in the garden enlivens the senses again. And the senses are really our gateway to the world.
Lisa has been coming here for nearly 2 years after a car accident left her with chronic back pain.
I was never really interested in flowers, plants or anything before my accident and before finding Blackthorn. Yeah. Now, they're just wonderful, the beauty of them and the peace that it brings to me. I get lost in it.
What do you think you'd be doing if you wasn't at Blackthorn?
I'd probably be at home, laid flat, with lots of medication and not really doing anything. But coming to Blackthorn, each part and each stage of the programme brought me back to life.
Vivian was prescribed the garden to address the effects of social isolation, while Mark's just been coming here for a few months. So, Mark, what brought you to Blackthorn?
Well, I came here because I was disabled a couple of years ago. And I've been in constant pain and found the daily living was just about managing my pain and managing the anxieties and problems that come with it. And I came to Blackthorn and it's given me a bit of space for me so that I've got something I can look forward to. There's something about being sort of close to the plants really makes you feel sort of grounded and connected. And that's what this place does, it makes you feel connected.
And we take an interest in each other, you know, and their other people's problems, and it just sort of alleviates yours.
Do you think you'd get the same benefit if we were just sat down at a cafe having a chat?
No.
No.
Why is that?
I spend a lot of time in my head in pain. Being here, there's just something about it.
Gardening, there's only one way to say it, it's good for you.
It certainly is. Paul used to come here to treat his depression and social anxiety. So, do you think you know what it was specifically about the gardening that was helping your particular condition?
I was quite broken.
Right.
And I needed to come back together, so it felt like the gardening facilitated that.
Yeah.
Having that awareness that everything changes, everything's transient, definitely gave me a sense of hope for the future. I'm now a self-employed gardener.
Oh, really?
That's keeping me very busy.
That's brilliant. It just goes to show, doesn't it? You know, how things can just turn around with a bit of time and patience like our lovely plants need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's clear that prescription gardening is working for the people here, and it's looking hopeful that green medicine could be offered to more people in the future. It's predicted that in the next 5 years, social prescribers working with the NHS will give out 900,000 appointments a year, which will include gardening. All of these stories are a compelling argument for how gardening can be a medicine. It can relax, it can rejuvenate, and it can help with social interaction. And all of those benefits are not only good for the body, but for the mind and spirit too.
I'm so glad that mental health is being talked about openly and seen as something that we have to deal with. It's central to life, and that gardening can be part of the solution, and long may that continue. Now, behind me is one of my favourite roses. It's Rosa Moisei geranium. And it's got these lovely bright red flowers, small, very simple, and they're carried on the shrub in star-like fashion. And when it's at its best, it feels as though they're suspended in midair. Everything is fabulous, except for one thing. It's got fire blight. And you can see here that you have a stem with the foliage looking as though it's been in a fire, which is why it's called fire blight. And this is a bacterial infection that actually can afflict most members of the rose family. And here at Longmeadow, I've seen fire blight on hawthorn hedges, on apple trees, pears, and then you'll also see it on some roses. But before you get too alarmed, it's not that common, and it's very, very rarely terminal. And the way to deal with it is simply cut it out. Cut back to living, healthy growth. So I'm going to follow this back here. I'm going to need to cut right back in there to here. Right, now this comes out. Even if I have to cut back half the shrub, it'll regrow, and it'll regrow healthily. The plant itself is not affected, it's just parts of the plant. Now I shall burn this, and if you possibly can burn it, that is by far the best thing to do. If that's not practical, don't put it in your green waste, because there is a real chance of spreading it. And finally, whenever you cut back any diseased branch, whether it be for fire blight or anything else, disinfect the tools. So I will disinfect my saw and my secateurs before using them again. Now, I know I complain a lot about how wet it is here at Longmeadow, but by and large, it's very mild, winter and summer alike. But I know from personal experience that it is a very different kettle of fish up on the North York moors. And we've been sent a film by Chris Milnes, who deals with those harsher conditions and yet still manages to produce a wide range of fine vegetables.
Been growing vegetables for a lot of years now. Where we are here, we're up in the hills, we're down near the river, we're in a frost pocket, we get frost as late as early June and can get another one back in September, so we'll take a few precautions if I'm going to grow vegetables successfully. So I'll show you one or two things just around my veg plot. This is my garlic bed, which I've been growing for a lot of years, and I use my own clothes every year, so they become acclimatised to the conditions and they grow really well, no matter how cold it gets in the early spring. But what I really wanted to show you was what I've done in the greenhouse, which is the first time I've tried something a bit different. You'll see even here my grapevine has been touched by the frost, some of them tender leaves, but I built this this hot box, which is just very simple, 4 sheets of wood, post, fastened together with some cable ties, so it's easy to take down. And then I got a friend in the village, gave me some fresh horse manure. That's what you need. I packed it in here, packed it down, put some water in, gives off a lot of heat when it's composting. I've grown seeds in here, kept all my tender plants. It's done really well. I can recommend that to anyone who's trying to grow vegetables in a climate like we've got here. So I hope that's helpful, and that's all. Thank you very much.
Chris does live in the most glorious part of the world, and I do know the weather is harsh. I remember someone saying to me that summer comes in the second week of July and leaves round about the third. But it doesn't seem to have stopped Chris. He's growing lovely veg. Now, these are obviously broad beans. They're getting a little bit on the large side. I haven't been picking them as often as I should. And if I open these out, that's about as big as I like a broad bean to be. Any bigger than that, and they can get rather flowery. I think before these pods get any bigger, I'm going to have to pick the whole lot, prep them, and then freeze them. That's a job I must get on with. But here are some other jobs that you can do this weekend. Sow lettuce seeds for harvesting in early autumn. Sprinkle the seeds onto a container, cover them over, and they should be ready to prick out in about 3 weeks' time. As soft fruit ripens, it is important to protect them from birds. Just drape a temporary netting over it, fixing it firmly at the top of the bottom, and also making sure it's taut so the birds can't get tangled. And leave it on for as long as it takes for the fruit to fully ripen and be harvested. If, like me, you sowed biennials such as wallflowers or foxgloves a few weeks ago, some will now have germinated and be ready to prick out. Choose the largest seedlings and, holding them carefully by a leaf, prise out as much root as you can before potting them on into individual plugs. Water these and set them to one side, and then you can have another go at the smaller seedlings in a week or so's time. And if you haven't sown any biennials yet, it's not too late to do so now. I've been sitting listening to this blackbird for the last 5 minutes. And of course, we're now coming up to the summer solstice, the longest day, the peak of the year. And if ever there was a moment to sit in your garden and listen to the birds and take in the fragrance and the sights of the flowers, it's now. So enjoy and make the most of your midsummer gardens. And I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at the slightly earlier time of 7:30. So until then, bye-bye.